What we're going to be talking about today is just basically a little bit of tips on transitioning back to face-to-face, but also just we want to address some of the questions. And I mean this sincerely, is that after last month's session, we had some great questions, and we want to address some of them and just make sure that we're talking about things and answering your questions, because we pay attention to what you're seeking. We want to address where you are and understand what's going on as a part of this. Okay, but many of you are transitioning back to face-to-face. And it's and you're aware. I'm not telling you anything you don't know, but there were some positives towards virtual. And this we showed you this one before, but this is just a kind of a reminder that the mute all setting will be the most missed part of remote teaching. And there's some people out there that the opportunities to do that will just it's going to pose some problems. Okay, and so I've as a part of this also, we would like to highlight some resources that are available for you to make your life easier and just improve what's going on. And these are all very current resources. All of these, from what I can tell, are free resources. I'm not trying to sell you anything. We're not trying to get information out to you that you can't access. But the first thing is a PATAN resource. It's a series of modules on the essentials of IEP writing. And you can see that it's under PATAN. We'll have this link as part of the notes. But the next one is from May 24th to July 5th. And I just had all of my students at Shippensburg take this module, and they really liked it. It's Pennsylvania specific knowledge. It's put out by PATAN. It's got great information. It's done through Schoology, and my students just really raved about it. I was hoping that they would also rave about me too, but they raved about this. So I'm just letting you know about this, and just make sure that this is something. If you have someone who's new in your district or just needs a refresher on IEP writing, this has all the steps, all the tips, everything you need to know as a part of this. It's a very well done module, and I can't recommend it more highly. Okay, the next thing, and I have links so that you can access this, is the U.S. Department of Education just 2 days ago updated its COVID-19 handbook. They have a volume 1, strategies for safely reopening elementary and secondary schools. This was something that was been put out previously, but they updated it. And so, but it's the latest information from the U.S. Department of Education. There is a link to this in the notes section that I gave to Sarah and Ethan, so you'll have access to this. But it's got great current information. I highly recommend it. One of the things that they did notice is a part of this is that the CDC guidelines have changed from distancing from 6 feet to 3 feet, and I know many of your districts are talking about going fully face-to-face, but keeping kids 3 feet apart from each other. One recommendation I have is maybe we can reduce some of our class sizes, but I don't see that happening, things like this. All right, some additional resources. Here's some additional resources. Is those of you who are into understand PBIS, the Positive Behavior Intervention and Supports website, you can see this. Here's a really good guide on that came out last month on returning to school during and after crisis, a guide to supporting states, district schools, educators, students through a multi-tiered system of support framework. This is a wonderful school-wide program that you need to strongly consider, and one that will be of great assistance and help you as a part of what you're doing. These are resources that are written in a familiar, easy to read language, easy to implement, and it's written for people to help as a part of this. Okay, another one from PBIS is supporting PBIS implementation through phases of crisis recovery. This was published in February, and we're going to potentially talk a little bit about that today. Is the kids that we are dealing with, and our staff and our teachers, we've all been through a crisis. Just think about this. Think about where you were just 13 months ago, and think about all that you have learned. The problem is, and we were just talking about this prior to logging in with you guys, is that a year ago, middle of April last year, we knew how to act. We knew what was expected of us. We were expected to stay home and to wear masks and not really do anything or go anywhere. Now, a year later, after we've been in the pandemic, we're in this ambiguous gray zone. And many of us are feeling stress about, can we go to work? Can we have kids in the class? What's going on? Who's been vaccinated? Who's not been vaccinated? What do we do? What can we touch? What can we not touch? When can we go see our parents? Kinds of things. And so we're all in this gray area, but we've all been dealing with a level of stress. And this is something that we need to pay attention to because the kids have been experiencing this stress also. So through crisis recovery is something that we need to focus on and pay attention to as a part of this. So keep this in mind as we talk about this. Okay, another resource. And again, these links are all available. They're all free resources. As a former secondary teacher, what I'm finding is I see a lot of stuff for elementary. So I purposely look to make sure that there's the needs of kids in secondary programs are highlighted. And the National Center on Intensive Intervention as a part of AIR has a great resource on supporting secondary students with intensive needs during the pandemic. Just a list of great resources, great advice. There's in the show notes, there's a hyperlink to this so that you can easily access this, and it goes directly to this. But I would recommend that you also poke around after that at the National Center of Intensive Intervention and just see the other resources that are available for them, and keeping that in mind. Another resource, and this is from the Center for Learner Equity, which was just recently changed their name about a month or two ago. It was the National Center on Charter Schools, ensuring faith for students with disabilities during COVID, a resource for educators. They've expanded away from charter schools, and the director, Lauren Rim, is doing a nice job of getting information out. And so this is a really good resource. I spent some time with this the other night, and so it's got some information out there. We have talked in this series about making sure that you're providing FAPE. And if you don't have access to, didn't attend those sessions, all these sessions are archived, and so you can go back and look and see what's going on as a part of this. Okay. And the last one, a free one, is the American Institute of Research and Forums episode, Meeting the Needs of Students with Disabilities During COVID-19. It's a good one. It's just, you can listen to it through SoundCloud. It's just a really nice way of actually paying attention to where we are with this. And addressing what's going on. So just keep this in mind as what we're talking about of this, okay? So just those are resources, again, all free resources. We're pushing free stuff on you. What is the emphasis here? It's free, F-R-E-E. So keep in mind that these are resources that will benefit you and benefit the kids with whom you work. What I'm gonna do is I'm gonna switch gears now. I'm gonna switch to take some of the questions. Last month, we just had, I think the technical term is a plethora number of questions. We had a bunch of questions, and I'm just going to take some of those questions and further address them, because these are continued questions that I've had since I work with school districts across the nation. And so I've seen school districts and personnel continue to ask very similar questions on this. Not all my answers are going to be perfect. You may not like all my answers, but I'm going to try to give us all closure on these things. So the first question: what should be done when multiple attempts to gather information from the student has been attempted but not answered? So this is basically an assessment type question, because what we're asking, I mean, you've heard me, we'll talk a little bit more about this in a few minutes. You've heard me talk about the need to dramatically up or increase the progress monitoring that you're doing on these kids. Because first, it's better for teaching, and it's better for the kids for us to understand precisely what's going on with them. But what we need to do is figure out what can we do for these students who are not logging on. So I got some statements and questions that you need to ask as part of these informal assessments we're doing. I mean, can the assessments be delivered remotely? As you truly said, some of these assessments, not all these assessments can be delivered remotely. And we have to think about, is this something that we can change or something we need to alter? Who can administer this? Does it need to be a teacher? Can a parent administer? Any data can we share with the team could we get out of this? And this could be non-data. Share data or non-data with the parents. And then another question. I mean, I've got a series of questions relating to this, because I'm not directly answering the question. I'm aware of this. Is how will the data that we do get guide instruction? And that's, so is it actually going to change what we're doing, or do we actually need this data? So keep this in mind as we talk about this. And one thing we've talked about in these sessions previously is I'm adamant that we need to use it to guide instruction. Wait, more. Can this be done over the computer, over the internet? Is there any other information out there that we can get on this child, or are there other ways of accessing the information? If we can pay attention to what's going on, can we see how the student compares to norms? Just a variety of things is a part of this. Can norms even be used? Talk about this with parents about the delivery of progress monitoring, how we need to get this information. More, plan regular intervals. For students who are not coming in, maybe we can work with parents about getting more regular data to understand about this, but then check the data. And can you obtain answers from the progress monitoring? And I'll get to this in a second about are these things valid? Don't worry. Can we work with the parents to schedule this? Can we use this for instruction? Are there other areas, other forms? Are we showing regression, IEP goals, or other changes? These last areas get to the heart of what we're talking about previously. Is do we have data that's demonstrating that the kid is making progress? Do we have data where we know what's going on? If we don't know this, we can't affirmatively designate exactly what's going on. So what we need to think about as a part of this is, what are we doing with this child, and then pay attention to where we are with this. Okay. I realize I didn't answer the question directly, but what you have to think about this is all the avenues. Do everything you can. I emphasized this previously, is just continue to keep trying. Wait, I got a better one for you. Right? How can we guarantee our assessments are accurate measurements when you're administering them virtually because your school is not open for in-person or even in hybrid? The person who asked this question is worried that the data is not accurate because I can't see the students are using things like calculators or other resources they would have access to in person. Okay, so just talk about this. Okay, if assessments are being administered remotely, there is no guarantee that you're getting accurate information. I just want to make sure you understand this. Even if cameras are on and teachers are supervising, and let's put that in air quotes, you cannot guarantee that the students aren't using other tech tools out of sight to either Google answers, to use calculators, or use Quizlet, whatever. To be honest, the best thing you can probably do is create assessments that require higher order thinking and reasoning types of answers that aren't Googleable, to ensure that students aren't just retrieving answers from other apps. Even in math, by creating multi-step problems, it allows teachers to see whatever students have as a part of their process, not just the ability to use the calculator. And quite frankly, why not just level the playing field during this time and tell all the kids that you don't mind if they do use a calculator for certain assessments? Even if you do all these things, though, in a remote situation, you still can't guarantee that there isn't a parent, an adult, a peer, a sibling somewhere in the background prompting them. So perhaps maybe focus more on formative types of assessment, like questioning the student during class directly, whiteboard activities where they have to generate an immediate response, those kinds of things. Those are where you can monitor student learning, and then more than relying so heavily on typical summative assessments like end of unit tests. So keep that in mind as we talk about this. No, you can't guarantee it. All right. Next question. Okay. We talked about the needs being met by goals, but can needs also be addressed by an SDI? In the Commonwealth, we have 3 ways to address a need. We can address a need either through a goal statement, through an SDI, or through a transition statement for the kids that are 14 years of age and older. So yes, needs can be addressed through an SDI. But when we look at this, and this is something that I was quizzing my class about this the other day, is all kids, the minimum number of, there's not a maximum number of goals. The longest IEP that I've seen of late is 103 pages. Please don't go do that again. That was long. But there is not a maximum number of goals, but there is a minimum number of goals. There should be a minimum number that each kid should have at least one goal to understand that there needs to be a special education teacher providing services. So we have to think about this and keep that in mind as we talk about that. All right. So keep that in mind, right? Next, can you offer some advice on how we work with families of students who are not showing up for class or interventions? How much effort should focus on achieving the minutes outlined in IEP? Okay. So what should you do? Go with the option initially and be considering it that you record everything. I would recommend exploring whether the failure to log on or otherwise participate in virtual instruction has something to do with the student's disability. just strongly consider that. Is because the student doesn't understand what they're supposed to be doing, or maybe the student is anxious, or the student has anxiety related to this. If so, if that student has concerns, they should be addressed by the student's IEP team to determine whether there are any additional supports that could be provided to assist in improving the student's participation, or whether there is any possibility the student could attend in-person schooling if that option is available. So yes, first, strongly consider to make sure that you can rule out that there's nothing as part of the student's disability that's preventing this. But otherwise, document everything about this. So let's get to the next question, which ties more to this also, okay? So for distance learning situations, what if a parent wants all special education services, but won't bring kids to school, even for special education services, doesn't follow through with planned Zoom sessions, and won't return sent homework? Now, we document all this, but are we out of compliance? Well, and many of you know that the role that I play with school districts is I come in after there's been a crisis and try to help mop up so that we can move forward to improve services so that we learn from what's going on. But the answer to this one is, why would the school district be out of compliance if it is making services available and a parent is failing to participate? I do think, as with all students, where situations where students are not attending school, some efforts should be made to discuss the concern with the parent to determine why the students are not attending and whether any additional supports might be necessary to support increased participation. If that fails, attendance actions may be appropriate. But it's interesting is I'm seeing BCBAs putting students not doing FBAs for kids with sporadic attendance because they can't get clear data on what's going on, but putting students on improved attendance plans and paying more attention to those kinds of things. So those are important. Okay. Another question, can you touch on the difference between specially designed instruction and special education services, and how important it is that a student with an IEP receives special education services? Can IEP be appropriate without any service from special ed personnel? Well, let's talk about this, okay? Let's talk about this. Under federal law, actually special education is considered basically special education is defined as where the kid receives specially designed instruction. All right, so keep that in mind as we talk about this. But we define, like, we have to think about program modifications. We have to think about what we're doing with the child, and so you need to think about this. Is the student needs, at least, as I said just a few minutes ago, a minimum of one goal for the special education teacher to work on, because otherwise the child does not meet the needs or meet the definition of having need for special education services, because the definition for special education is that the child first has a disability and second needs the need of a special education teacher. It's a two-part test. Well, if you look at your the Commonwealth's ERs and RRs, they label it as a three-part test, but the first one is that the kid's not eligible. But it's basically that we have to think about this is, what can we do to make sure that what we're providing for the kids helps address, do they really have needs? If the child doesn't have the need for a special education teacher, then that child doesn't need special education. So keep that in mind as we talk about that, all right? Some more, okay? Next, I would like to get your thoughts on thinking that a student's needs are addressed without writing a goal, but addressing it through accommodations. We do not do this where I practice, and I'm very against it, but I often see this incoming documents. I would like your thoughts on this process. Well, let's talk about this. Let's just talk about where we are about program modifications, what we mean this, okay? So there are certain changes that may be made to a general education classroom to make it possible for a child eligible with a disability to participate more fully and effectively in a general education activities that take place in the room. Those changes could involve, for example, providing a special seating arrangement, using professional or student tutors to help the child, maybe raising the level of this child's desk, more time to complete a given assignment, working with the parents, those kinds of things. Those are modifications. Those are not accommodations. So what we have to think about is, we talk about the difference between modifications and accommodations, is when you are seeing a child eligible for special education, they're going to get modifications. They need modifications to the curriculum. They need modifications to the teaching. They need modifications to the instruction, modifications to the grading. They need some form of modifications, and that's something we need to address. Kids who just get accommodations, though, are typically kids eligible for under Chapter 15 or Section 504 plans. And so we have to think about this is that going back to the previous question, is you need to do something more than just providing accommodations. There needs to be a goal. And we need to make sure that we're addressing this as a part of where we are with this. Okay, next. When a related service provider is not available in a school district due to not being hired, how can FAPE be provided? Well, that's a very good question, because the formal definition in the federal regulations and in Chapter 14 of our state code is the kid is eligible for special education and related services. So there are some districts that have complained that we can't get people as a part of this. They can't attract individuals. The law does not look kindly at that. The kids, you have to contract or find someone out there to provide these services. You may have to pay more through your IU, or you may have to contract with a private service agency to do something. But if the child needs the related service to participate, be it transportation, be it special aid, be it intermittent catheterization, speech language services, OT, PT, you need to provide it. The needs of the child as listed in the PLAF statement dictate what's to be provided as opposed to what your district has available in the school district. This is one thing that trips up school districts immensely across the state, as I've been in a lot of the districts, is that the needs of the child dictate what's going on, not what you have available. So keep that in mind as we address this, okay? Changing gears, okay? Some of you are now in the process of reworking your IEPs, reworking what's going on. So one of the things you need to think about is how to get information. This is a very different topic, but you need information as a part of this as we're getting these kids back into face-to-face from the general education teachers. And the problem is how do we get information from general education teachers? Because the general education teachers are busy. They also don't know what's going on as a part of this, okay? And so they don't understand where you are with what we can help as a part of this. And so we understand we need to address what to do about this. So here's, because when I used to work with general education teachers and say I need a statement for the child's program as a part of getting them back in school and writing their IEP, they didn't know if you wanted one sentence or 700 words. So here's just a broad outline, and I've got an example for you. This will facilitate your participation with them. But here, just basically, just a statement. I'm gonna walk you through this, don't worry. But a statement from any form is filled out. The date the information was provided for the report. That helps us make sure and ensure that what we're looking at is current. Because the first P in PLAF stands for present. And I've seen districts using data from 3, 4, 5 years ago as current. That doesn't count. A list of the student's strengths. A list of the concerns of the students as a general education classroom teacher. A statement of how the student compares with the average students in the classroom so that we understand why does this child need special education services. A statement describing anything out of the ordinary regarding the student's class schedule or day, any accommodations or modifications that are used that are helpful to the student, and a list of current grades. If you could get this from your general education teachers as a part of IEP development, I'm betting you'd be a very happy campers and that you could be a great assistance as a part of this. So I've got an example here, okay? A 4th grade example for a kid, Griffin, but you can see this. Yeah, it's predated here. Don't worry, September 24th, 2021 has not happened yet, but this is what that teacher is going to be writing. So you have, what are the student's strengths? And the teacher would list what the strengths are. And you can share that, you're happy to share this with them. What are the areas of concern? You can see the strengths, and sometimes the teachers wrestle trying to figure out what are the strengths of these kids. And so where we have as a part of this, okay? Okay, and then what are the areas of concern? And for this kid, it was not focusing, working independently, 1 grade level below in reading, difficulty understanding, difficulty following written directions. But what are the students' strengths? What are the students' areas of concern? Things like this. That is an important one, okay? Okay, next, how does the student compare to average students, same age peers in the classroom? Things like this, just a description here, just where, so we can highlight where we do, how this kid is doing. Then grades. What are the grades for this kid? What's going on? Factors affecting class schedule or day. Student may come in late. Student may receive ESL instruction. What is different about this kid's program? What's going on? And then last, any accommodations or modifications that are helpful to the student. And so just anything that what might be for the team to understand what we can do to help address this. Now, I'm not saying this is the definitive best one out there, but some of you are just wrestling with how to get information from general education teachers. If you can give them a model that asks these basic questions and use this to incorporate what's going on into their IEP, you're going to have a heck of a lot better, more success, and it make your life a lot easier. Okay. So now switching gears yet again, progress monitoring. Right? A lot of the questions we talked about were more on progress monitoring. So there's people who wanted some more of hows. And I'm going to use some of the same verbiage that I used before, but just to hit you over this so that you understand what's going on. But you can also justify this back to your team as a part of this. Okay, first. So one of these questions, you need to ask these three questions when you're thinking about progress monitoring. And just to remind you, the last time we were talking about this last month. And we were talking about the fact that you need to do regular progress monitoring and use that to make informed decisions about what's going on. Because without that, and I think I even showed you some examples of kids where they had progress monitoring data, it was poorly done and showed that the child was not making progress, and yet the team did very little to improve the services for the child. So first, how will the child's progress be measured? Just how are we going to do this? I mean, Ames Web is huge in K through 8. It's because that's where it's normed. Same thing with Dibbles. And so you have to think about remember, just the author of Dibbles used to live in Carlisle and work for the CAIU, just a plug for Carlisle. But if we talk about this, is that we have this, and it's an important part of where we are, is about how the child progress will be monitored. Second, when will the child's progress be monitored? That gets to the heart of what we were talking about last time, is emphasizing, making sure that you're regularly progress monitoring and talking about this and paying attention to this. So I'll talk more about this in a minute. And then how well will the child need to perform in order to achieve his or her stated IEP goals? And for some children, benchmarks are objectives. So what are we looking for as a part of this? And I'm well aware the students on the first time that they go through things, they're not going to master what's going on, but geez, please, I would be nice if they would, but sometimes it takes time, but you need to be able to graph this and pay attention to this. And then you must provide a progress monitoring report on the same schedule as the gen ed teachers, interim reports, report cards, whatever, provide to their non-disabled kids. So keep that in mind. So information on the how. Conducted frequently and provides, there's some terms I've highlighted in this, provides an easy and quick, remember, easy and quick method for gathering student performance data on important grade level skills, content, or just where the student is focusing. It's an analysis of students' progress to modify instructional programs. And it's a comparison of data to individual students or to other students in the classroom so that we can get to understand where we are with this. So this is what you have to think about this as we address this, as where are we going and what are we doing as a part of this. So this is the important part. And this is this is what we're focusing on. So this is what I want you to pay attention to and keep this in mind as we address this. So keep this in mind as we pay attention to this because we can't do enough on this. Okay. So more on this. Okay. So I'm going to talk about trauma just for a few minutes. Then I'm going to tee up Sean, who's going to talk about 2 case studies. I've already talked about this before. We had Eric Rosen talk about this in the fall. And so it's as part of this series, and he did a wonderful job, filled in for me when my technology botched. But you can see some of the examples of some of the things that we're seeing with kids in trauma. And these are very clear examples that you're going to see. And so some of these kids have had a lot of problems for when they go, okay? So you have difficulty with memory, reduced cognitive capacity, sleep disturbance, language delays, impulsive actions. There's a variety of things going on here. So there's a lot that we have as a part of this. And this is something that we need to pay attention to, because when we talk about the needs of these kids, we need to make sure that what we're doing is addressing all what's going on. The problem is we've all been in the same storm this past year. And I mean this literally, been part of the same storm, this pandemic storm. The problem is some of us have been riding different boats. And so you can see how this is affecting all of us. And it's affecting all of us in very different ways. So this is something that we need to pay attention to as a part of this, is what is going on that we can help as a part of dealing with some of these kids as a part of trauma, okay? More, why is trauma important? Okay, school performance, kids are 2.5 more times likely to fail a grade. Those are not good odds. I don't know odds. I don't gamble enough. Those are not good odds. They also have receptive and expressive language difficulties. So it poses a problem. They're suspended more often. They're expelled more often. And in this heightened sense of this is why some of you are PSSAing like crazy and thinking about these things, is we're thinking about what's going on, is have lower scores on standardized achievement tests and more eligible for special education. So what I want to do is I truly want to think, I want to change your thinking, okay? I want to change your thinking. And how I want to do this is think differently. Think differently about the students. Think differently so that it's not focusing on what's wrong with you to what happened. And now the problem is, and as opposed to like, and it would be nicer if relatives would do this, but it would be nicer to pay attention to this. The problem is we may never know. Okay? We may never know as a part of this. So the trauma may never be identified. The history is often unknown. Classmates may be traumatized. They may not know what's going on. So there's a variety of things as a part of this. It poses a problem. It poses a problem that we don't often pay attention to where we are as a part of this. Okay. And so keep this in mind as we talk about this, is we may never know this. Well, what can you do? Focus on the whole school. Truly focus on the whole school. What are the issues in your school? What are the issues and how can we address this? And what are the issues in your town? Keep this in mind, because the town, my town, I live in Carlisle, the needs here are very different than some of the needs in some of the areas around us. But train all staff to support students and identify behaviors. Okay, make sure that classroom teachers focus on safety, needs, and security. But make sure you do this based on data. Now, why is this important? Is these students can often articulate what's going on with them. And I mean this literally, is they can't articulate where we are with this, and they can't articulate what we can do as a part of this. So one thing that you have to think about this is that all behavior that the students engage in is communication. So whatever the student is doing, they may not be able to articulate exactly. You know, I'm having severe problems with this math assignment. I'm not getting enough support from home, things like this. They don't say that. They don't raise their hand and say, I need help. You need to think about when they engage in these behaviors, what can be done as a part of this, okay? So this is something that we need to think about and we need to pay attention to and address. And we need to understand what's going on with these and understand that all behavior is a form of communication, okay? So I'm gonna skip down. I've got some basic things, okay? Basic things I want to think about. What you can do for these kids is be responsive, maintain consistent daily routines, okay? Make sure the students understand when something out of the ordinary is occurring. Allow students developmentally appropriate choices. I mean, it's appropriate for kids to seek attention from you. Don't worry about this. That's what they're supposed to be doing. Do what you can to anticipate difficult periods and transitions. Help with self-regulation. Help with students' feelings. And be nurturing and affectionate. Just truly be nurturing and affectionate as a part of this, because the more you can do that, the easier it's going to be as a part of this. And I want to emphasize that as much as possible. So keep that in mind as we address these things. So these are all part of the notes here, but I want to think about this, okay? If there's nothing else you learned from me today, and I truly mean this, is every time you think of calling a kid attention seeking this year, consider changing it to connection seeking. Just think about how your perspective changes on this, because I know you have some kids out there that are just demanding your attention. If not, we have some extras that we can send your way so that you can get the full unfettered experience as a part of this. But think about this as we talk about this. These kids are seeking connections. Some of these kids are desperate for connections. Some of these kids just absolutely need more assistance on this. So keep that in mind as we talk about this, okay? So one thing I wanted then, let me say, okay? So, okay, Shift from asking, how do I get the student to behave, or how can I get the student to stop whatever they're doing, to what is causing this behavior and how can we mitigate that? And what does this child need to succeed? So keep that in mind as we talk about this. All right. So I'm going to tee it up for Dr. Smith, but I have two case studies. Okay. We have Eli, a third grade student with autism, some language issues, problems with toileting, needs some help with independent work, following directions. He's been in virtual school since August and is now coming back to school. What are some suggestions we might have for him? The second case study, Jonas. He's a ninth grade boy with learning disabilities, needs help with reading. He's been in a hybrid program and now needs some greater assistance. So I'm going to tee it up for him. But those of you who have questions, that's my email address. Yes, I work at Shippensburg. I'm proudly a member of the state system of higher education, whatever that means. So I things like this. But I'm going to turn it back over to Dr. Smith. All right. So stop sharing. Okay.
Just have to click everything, folks. Good afternoon. Let me go ahead and share. So if I could get David, before I leave you, can you see my screen?
I can.
Perfect. Okay, good. And thank you, Sarah. All right, so for the few minutes we have left, so what I wanted to do is I wanted to actually get at a number of different things that David shared today. And also based on the feedback we've been receiving, try to make some connections there. And particularly, as we've heard throughout kind of the presentation, a number of different things touched upon, but one element was that information that we need to collect. And we've been talking about this through a series of presentations, if you've been with us, about assessment, collecting that data while they're remote, hybrid, of course, as they're face-to-face, to make further determination, and particularly to assist with those last two scenarios, as David mentioned, as he signed off. And so with that said, what I want to try to reinforce here in the minutes I have are everything from what we should be thinking about as educators, and some reinforcement, some review for some of us, to, in terms of those students that we're trying to meet in a variety of different ways, and be where they were and now where they are, but also, again, the individuals at home that have been supporting us, or we've been trying to engage, or we've been looking to support us as things have been going along, and thought we'd tie this into the data element, since that's been a kind of a primary. And as I mentioned, clearly David spent some time on that today from a legal perspective, and thought I would carry that over with some of these tools. So let's get started with that. All right. And I'm going to try to focus in on a couple different examples to illustrate. So there's a couple tools here, and this is a presentation that I made available, and Sarah and Ethan and the PATAN folks will get this out to you folks. But with that, a couple different tools that are widely available. David mentioned earlier the National Center on Intensive Interventions, and they have a couple tools that, if you're familiar with, awesome. If you're not, I want to reinforce. One's academically aligned, and the other's behaviorally aligned. And they're the tools that you can access to be able to collect that the progress monitoring data in respect to behavior or academic. So let me go ahead, and I'm actually going to pop over to the screen here and take you to the live shot of the academic screening tool chart. And for those of us who have been with us in the past, I think David and I both mentioned this. I just want to reinforce it. It's underutilized. The subject areas, of course, reading, mathematics. I can go across grade level. And the nice little thing is there's tabs to organize things, and it's organized by alphabetical in terms of the product. But usability features, it also allows me to know how long is it automatically scored, does it align to what types of components, but also then, of course, how can I then use it? And I'm going to give you some additional examples to illustrate that with many of the systems that you currently have available, including, of course, resources like this that are advertising even more. So this is more for our academic to be able to get at some of those answers. And we can do this. Hopefully we've been doing this prior, but of course, as they return face-to-face, many of these tools were created for that purpose, to kind of continue with that ongoing monitoring of progress. Now, the other tool besides the academic, and actually, I'm going to stay over here on the site, and I'm just going to I'm going to stay over here on the site. And I'm just simply going to pop up under their resources and tools. And I have this hyperlinked off the presentation, but the behavior screening chart. And of course, a little different. Of course, it's not going to be academic. It's going to be more internalizing, externalizing, et cetera. But there are focus in terms of usability features, et cetera. Don't have a lot here, but this is a growing database for you to bookmark and or save or however you organize yourself to return to. So there's a couple tools to consider as you go forward in terms of that ongoing element that David mentioned for a portion of this conversation with that assessment and monitoring progress. So I always mention these as we go along because, again, it's that continuation as the students are returning more face-to-face, but the LMS and the content management systems, but particularly for many of us, the LMS elements that have been available to us that many of us are continuing to gain maturity in and expertise in are rich elements to not only collect data, but to share data, to conduct data walks, to communicate with our parents and our family members at home, especially during these transition times where maybe they have been engaged. Now, wait a minute, are they going to be as engaged as we try to finish out the year? So those tools are regularly available to us. They have a number of different features in, and I know many of us have been trying to catch up and explore those, particularly for that progress monitoring, that assessment, that data information. And of course, in addition to those LMS systems, there are one-off tools. In previous presentations, we mentioned apps and a number of other things. And of course, as part of Google Classroom, one of our learning management systems, there's Google Forms. And remember, it can package things together. There's an automaticity for the child and for us. There's data that we have available to make some of these decisions, and the laundry list thing goes on. So just want to emphasize, reinforce, these tools are available off the PATAN website, and I'm probably mispronouncing PATAN. I've always mentioned it as that in my mind, so I apologize. But off their website, they have a number of different tools for this progress monitoring, in addition to tools to walk us through what good progress monitoring looks like. Okay, so with that in mind, let's talk about then some of this data that we want to use to direct us. And of course, graphing this information is available to us in a lot of our tools. This, by the way, is an example off of our Google Forms. And again, I want to reinforce that data is available to us literally click, 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 or touch, 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 depending upon the devices we're using to be able to manipulate the data to visualize it. And I want to reinforce how to use it in just a moment. For today's example, though, I'm not going to jump between Google Forms to Khan Academy Learning Management Systems to IXL. Instead, I wanted to kind of reinforce some things that came out, I believe, of particular questions that David was talking about from a legal perspective. Now let's kind of bring them to life in terms of usability. But I thought I'd do it with one tool. It's a tool I've mentioned before. And it's not a tool that some of you may be needing it, others of you not. It's just more of an illustration. But since I'm mentioning it, I want to make sure we're all on the same page. This is off of a website that's free to use. It's the writingclassroom.org, and it has a progress monitoring tool I will use to illustrate today that simply is for writing. But I'm not going to focus so much on the writing. It's rather, as we're looking at our LMS, our CMS, our apps that we have available to make some of these decisions, what types of elements should we be looking at within those systems for some of those ends we've been looking at? As a reminder to some, it is an introduction to others. The tool I'm mentioning is an automatic writing assessment, 3-minute writes. Writing prompts are automatically provided. It's automatically graded, automatically scored, and automatically put into a variety of different databases for students to look at and teachers to look at. Folks, in April of 2021, if we're not using automatic progress monitoring systems for reading, I would argue for writing, for some of our social, emotional, and others, then we probably are not as aware of the systems our districts or schools have invested in. I'm out here in a very poor area of the country in rural Kansas. We do not have the infrastructure the state of Pennsylvania does. And I'm amazed at some of the systems we've invested in or that are for free that offer these types of components. It's more a little bit of an investigation, contacting our IT people, or if it's our co-ops or our regional centers, contacting them so we have access to these types of systems that are doing it automatically for us to be able to assist in that progress monitoring. So for one purpose is for those data walks. You know, we've talked in the past about engagement. We've talked in the past about trying to direct instruction. We've been talking to also about how to kind of redirect as they're coming to us face to face in terms of understanding what we're trying to do instructionally. Data walks are an awesome way to do it. And of course, we've talked in the past about universal design for learning. And so when we conduct a data walk and think of the universal design for learning framework, we want to make sure we're not just simply sharing one element of testing scores. We want to make sure we're visually representing it. We want to make sure that there's an element that they can comprehend it and understand it so that they have a level of self-regulation, self-monitoring, and a bit of a, so to speak, skin in the game. And there's a number of different tools out there that help us visualize this for our students to then conduct student data walks. We're hand in hand with them, maybe we're virtually with them, but they're better understanding where they're at. So for example, in the past, and I love this equation, my dad was a school psychologist and he lived by mathematical equations saying, oh, I can determine a student with a learning disability just by the formulas. No, we don't want to provide that type of data. And yes, we can provide standard deviations and like, but I'm not talking about that type of data with data walks. Rather, let's look at the various ways these systems allow with a click to visualize various parts of the same data sets. We can go from plots to scatter plots to pie charts. We can change color, all depending upon the system we're using. And many of these are either free or they've been invested in by our regional centers, by our districts, whoever it may be that we're cooperating with or collaborating with. Trend lines, of course, for us that have been doing MTSS for years are awesome. I suggest identifying systems to work with a child to show where they're moving, to show that progress, or to show potentially where some of those challenges are. But look for systems when you're doing that interaction, not only with the child, but also with the peer you're collaborating with, as well as the parent, the adult at home. Try to identify systems that not only provide you the trend line, but many systems now, you can click on the individual dot, and then you can see the actual product at hand. And in this instance, I'm seeing the writing the child did and how it was scored. So immediately I can show my stakeholder, the child I'm working with, the parent I'm working with, et cetera, these elements that are struggling, where then we potentially talk about interventions and where we need to get started from next to further along our progress, be it face-to-face or if we're still in some sort of hybrid, but most of us, of course, transition to that face-to-face. Powerful tools available to us and to continue that type of conversation. In addition, though, I think we want to find systems that make a connection to interventions. And again, this is an example, but many systems do this. David was mentioning it off the Intervention Central. They offer intensive interventions. They offer suggestions with data and then connect over to some PDFs of solutions. This is an example the same way, where here's a student, here's where the student has been trending down, and here's over here, it's an area of production, and I can't actually see it because of or keyboarding, particularly in these instances, but it could be an area of production or organization. It could be drafting, it could be editing. And where these links go, folks, and because of time, I won't go over there, but where these links go, if we're live, they would actually take us over to illustrations of strategies to use with the child for production, organization, keyboarding, the list of things go for writing. But we're seeing this now in AIMS, DIBBLES, and other types of systems where they're not only showing us where the challenge is, but then they're suggesting a solution. Great for the child, great for the adult we're working with, be it professional or the parent. Okay, so let's kind of move on here. Oops, I was going to take you to the dashboard, but like I said, I don't have the time, so I'll just move on. The other element we need, and David was talking about this, about comparing to norms, discussing with the parents about where the child is to better understand potentially where we need to make some additional modifications, be it for the IEP as he was referring to, but also where we need to be moving on just academically. And also potentially how to share with the data with the team that is not only we can digest it and understand it, but also apply it. So for example, not only do we have these lines, as I mentioned a moment ago, in terms of trend lines, but also looking for data elements that I can show not only progress over time, but the product over time. And increasingly, a number of systems allow for this. So utilize that component. So not only do I see what's happening over time, and in this instance, it's a trend line, but I can also see the product so that the student sees the quantity and quality of changes, be it an upward trend, or potentially there's where you're struggling and you see what happened in terms of the differences. But also we can then show more evidence to the stakeholders we're trying to engage for support at home, be it more engagement at school, you use the intervention at school, whatever it may be in terms of that overall team. In addition, as we talk about national norms, a number of our systems will offer us the data in that sequence. I'm struggling with words, I apologize. This is comparing national handwriting norms, but also many of these systems over time will just compare to the student with their classmates, their grade level across classes. And those could be normed them in terms of, okay, this is where our typically developing learner is. This is where our struggling learner is. These are the individuals we're grouped, and maybe we're looking 25th percentile and below. So yes, some of our systems will go offer the norm references, but other systems over time will have some norms within the actual group of students we're working with and show where that child is placed beyond the trend line. They'll show that, oh, that child is in the orange with 8 other students at 25th percentile below. So that's something that we really need to coordinate with and work with. But we can also look at, for example, this is another data set from the same system, but you'll see from your systems to be able to show across time where groups of students are working specifically in terms of trending line progress, of course, across time. So these are types of data that is available to us with various ways that we click and organize our information from the learning management system, from the app we're using, or anything in between. So just want to emphasize and reinforce to utilize that for some of the answers to the questions David was offering. Now, David also mentioned the fact that we need to think about assessment differently. And we've talked about this in the past. His illustration today was that, gosh, what was happening at home, now what's happening at school. Maybe we were protecting against what we were going to assess at home because of the worry about maybe cheating or access to Google or things of that nature. Well, that rubric to me has always offered the flexibility of a variety of assessments, particularly as we've talked about in the past, alignment to the UDL framework, where I'm allowing flexibility in demonstration, action, expression. But the rubric, if you recall, allows me to set the expectations, share what is due, the quality, the quantity, but also it provides a map to the learner. But meanwhile, to the person at home, beyond the student, it provides directions, it provides instructions, it provides information to further guide us, as well as the adult that we're working with in the school environment to do the same. But it also gives us flexibility now of the various assessments we can provide, because of course the rubric allows for flexibility in the options, because of course it provides variations in terms of being able to score. So in addition, we can't forget about, now I'm going to need to end here because of time, different ways we can continue to have students give us information and us collect information. So I think we've underutilized the recording element. I'm not sure why. I think they are fearful that David Bateman stepping in saying illegal, but it's not. If we protect no district upon district in terms of recording video, audio, everything for speech and language needs, for articulation, for reading fluency, for decoding, for adaptive skill completion that we want to audio or video record or have images representing that data connection and completion. And it could be one of several data points, by the way. Utilize those, store it in a protective spot that can be then accessed by us as the educator, but utilize that for that what's happening when their child's not with us, or when the child's with us, but we're not able to be there face-to-face with them due to they're with another professional. Other technologies that we're now regularly using that can record data for us for what we're talking about in terms of that recording of progress, et cetera. I've run out of time. I've shared this website with both Ethan and Sarah. And I'm sorry, a bit of a pause there. And so there's a lot of hyperlinks here and a lot more information I haven't gotten to is trying to connect it back to what David was sharing. So I'm going to stop sharing. So give it back to Ethan and Sarah to be able to take it from there. And again, a resource there. Hopefully it will be helpful.